Have you heard the saying that a miscarriage is just like a heavy period? Well, this may be true for some, but this was not the case for me. Today, we are starting our first episode in our new podcast series, Miscarriage Misconceptions. The first misconception today is miscarriage is like a heavy period. I will be sharing my experience with my first of 2 early miscarriages. I'm going to share the physical and emotional aspects. We will also share the first of 3 important, helpful things we learned and that we hope will help you if you have had a miscarriage as well.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast series. This is Jeff and Tony Brabeck of Our Little Sparrows, Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support. If you'd like to find out more about us and our organization, check the link out below in the description. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell to get alerts for when we release new podcasts every Sunday. We're going to get started, so stick around.
Before we dig in, let me just give you a heads up right now that we will be sharing in depth about our experience and will be detailed in my physical descriptions of our miscarriage in this video. Yes, it might make you feel uncomfortable to hear this, but we hope you stick with us. We hope that by sharing our experience, you may be able to identify with our story in hopes that you feel less alone. We hope it will invite you to engage in conversations where the goal is to gain understanding and empathy. We also want to acknowledge that discussing and sharing my physical symptoms may bring up negative memories and flashbacks for those that have already experienced a miscarriage or another type of pregnancy loss. If that is the case for you, then listening and watching this video may create more harm than good, and we completely understand if you choose not to watch this episode. All right. Misconception number 1, it's just like a heavy period. I've heard it many times. Another statement I've heard going around is that it all happens in a gush of blood and it's over. Maybe you've heard it also. What's wrong with these statements? First of all, these statements give the false expectation that the bleeding is only slightly heavier than that of a heavy period. It gives the idea that you just need to wear a pad for a few days and you can go about your usual day. Associating it with the experience of a typical period gives the impression that this is something any female should be able to handle because periods happen once a month, and that it will end in a few days. So that's what a miscarriage should be like, right? No. So this is what it doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you that the bleeding can be extremely heavy, and if excessive, you may need to call your doctor or head to an ER. It doesn't tell you that you're not just shedding blood. It's tissue and clots, some rather large, like the size of a golf ball or more. If you've never had a miscarriage or postpartum bleeding, this can seem frightening. It also doesn't say much about pain or cramping. Some may experience mild cramping, similar to that of a period, but for many, it can also be fairly significant. What you may not realize is that the process of miscarriage is the similar process of delivering your baby at full term. Your body is preparing itself for your baby to exit your womb. The difference is you're experiencing it in the first 20 weeks of pregnancy, and unfortunately, there's nothing you can do to stop it once it starts. Which leads to my next point. It doesn't speak at all to the emotions, the loss and the grief felt of a miscarriage. Those statements just minimize what you are really experiencing. It can also be very frightening and traumatic. If your experience was traumatic, you are not alone. Many need to seek additional support, and there is no shame in that. In fact, we believe that asking for help and accepting it showcases your strength. Now, to give you an idea of what we mean, we are going to share our experience with our first miscarriage, which happened at just under 7 weeks. A few days after we tested positive, I noticed that my urine when I went to the bathroom was actually turning more orange. I didn't think much of it, but in hindsight now, I realized it was due to blood starting to appear in my system. Then I started seeing streaks of light pink with some clear discharge after I went to the bathroom. A few days after that, I started to bleed, and it was bright red. I felt it was much too heavy and too fast for it to not be a miscarriage. There were definitely a lot of clots and tissue that were being passed, and it definitely felt like not a typical period. This felt a lot like postpartum bleeding after you deliver a baby at 40 weeks. I can see how this could be traumatizing for someone who has never miscarried or delivered a baby before. Now, there are many reasons why you might experience bleeding and pain, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to miscarry. As nerve-wracking as it may be, the only way to really know for sure is to have an ultrasound done. Now, I bled consistently and steady for the next couple of hours. Then it started to slow down, and I still needed to wear a pad and change it frequently. And I did have some mild cramping. Now, we had scheduled our original OB appointment, but of course, we didn't even make it to that appointment to even confirm if we were pregnant. But we kept that appointment. We went and we did an ultrasound, and it was confirmed that a miscarriage took place and the baby had already exited my body. Now, I continued to bleed steadily for a few days, but not as heavy as the first couple hours. And then it was just continuous spotting. But the continuous spotting happened for 12 weeks. Sometimes it got heavier and then it was back to light spotting. I was wearing pads and liners basically for the next 12 weeks. Now, that may sound that all it was just inconvenient and that I had to deal with the spotting for 12 weeks. But those weeks were some of the hardest for me because I was still dealing with bleeding with no end in sight. I felt stuck. We lost our daughter just over a year before, and we just experienced the sudden loss of my mom and now this miscarriage. So I'm dealing with a lot of grief, and it was also a constant reminder of what I wasn't. I wasn't pregnant. The first thing we learned, or that I learned specifically, was that it wasn't my fault. I would think back and reflect if there was something I had done to cause this, like accidentally eating medium rare steak, or maybe there was something wrong with my body. I remember one of my doctors told me that this didn't happen because of something I did or didn't do. Unfortunately, miscarriage happens more than we realize, and once the process starts, there isn't anything we can do to stop it. If 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss, this shows us that we are not alone. Most likely you know someone who has had a personal experience with a miscarriage, whether it be directly or indirectly.
I mean, from my point of view, I felt like we lost, right? Like winning and losing. I felt like we lost, and I felt really deflating that it happened. Um, and we'd never experienced a miscarriage before, so my first thoughts were like, when you came to me and said, I'm spotting, I don't know what it means right now, or I'm just gonna let my body do its thing, and we'll see where it goes. And um it just, I don't know, it's like thinking about it, trying to think back 6 years ago since this happened, um and remembering what that was like. It just felt like a waiting game. It felt like completely new territory, yet familiar. A loss is a loss, right? And so, losing Olivia, completely different scenario, completely different loss story. But there was still a lot of newness to having a miscarriage. And it seemed a little surreal at first, like this isn't happening. Like, no, it's going to be okay. We just, it's just a little bit of, redness in her urine. It's not heavy. But when it turned heavy, and Tony's, I saw her hope um, draining out of her, and it turned into sorrow because she knows what's happening. Then it became like really sad and really emotional, and I just it just it just sucked, and you call the OB, or you call the advice nurse. I can't remember. It's probably your OB, and the OB's like, well, just discharge can happen. There's some shedding of the lining, maybe, or whatever. I don't even remember all the terminologies. I just remember them saying, just take it day at a time, and each day will reveal what the body's going to do. And then it came the day before we were supposed to have uh, um, our first ultrasound, to even see the little nugget, the little baby, heartbeat fluttering and moving, and we didn't even get to that. But the night before, I'm trying to remember what time of the day it was, but I just remember she was in the restroom, or was this the second miscarriage? I think it was the first miscarriage. You were in the bathroom in the master bathroom, and I couldn't find. For some reason I was looking for Tony. I was calling for her, and she wasn't responding. And I found her. I found you in the master bathroom. I opened the door, and you told me that it happened. That you passed. You're pretty sure you passed the baby. Um, and we won't go into any more detail about that, but when that happened, there was a finality, a sense of finality, a sense of it's gone, and really going to the ultrasound the next day, or maybe it was even Tuesday, we gave it a beat. I think we went right. We kept our appointment as far as I remember, and we went and her OB basically said there's nothing in the womb, which means the baby definitely passed through her system. And that just seemed like a formality. Like the day before was for me was the emotional. We lost what we thought we had, and really going to the OB, it was just confirmation for me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have. It was just, without knowing, right? And it's hard to even know that you passed the baby because it could be another blood clot. The baby could have been in the ultrasound, but I had already, in my mind, I'd already prepared myself for this isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Just based on how things built up and how things, progressed, and then leading up to that Sunday, the day before our scheduled appointment for the 7 week, let's confirm that you're pregnant after peeing on a stick, that nothing was there in that ultrasound. So I wasn't surprised. I wasn't shocked. I think I'd already prepared myself. Not to move on, but I had already prepared myself that we lost what we thought we had. It was really sad.
Yeah. I think too, because we had already lost Olivia. And we lost my mom, and so this kind of felt like, oh, we're pregnant, we're something good is happening, and
a light into the darkness, right?
And something to look forward to, and we didn't even just knew that baby existed only for a few days, and then it was gone, and it really,
it was harder to get pregnant than when we got pregnant with Olivia. The first time we got pregnant was so quick. We were like, we're not prepared for a baby. But here we are trying to have a baby. It's like, duh, this is going to happen. But this miscarriage, to even get pregnant for even though it was a miscarriage, it was actually more challenging. And so that was a letdown too. Is like we had really, we'd built up so much anticipation for wanting to be pregnant, and then to finally get pregnant, and then to lose the baby so quick. It almost felt like just like numb, like is this really happening? Like numbness, like surreal, right? That's how I opened it up. This experience was surreal, and it's like, really, is this happening? So I had to check myself. I mean, and what I mean by is saying those inappropriate things. Well, at least it was only 7 weeks. Well, at least we can start again sooner rather than later, because this didn't go on like it did with Olivia. And it's not. I mean, after Olivia, we joined Sharing Parents of Sacramento Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support. And I learned a lot. We learned a lot. We learned a lot that all those cliches, you're young. At least it was quick, and then you can start again. At least you didn't have to do the DNC because there's, pitfalls or not pitfalls, but
risks.
there's setbacks to that, and they would make you have to wait longer. And it's like none of that is appropriate, right? And or at least you didn't have to go through what you did with Olivia, and that diminishes Olivia, right? There's all those cliches out there, and I caught myself at the very beginning. As soon as it happened, part of me went there to at least it was only 7 weeks, and that's as far as that went. And that's something I said to her verbally out loud, and I'm like, I had to check myself and say, no, step back. That totally is taking away from the importance of that loss. And although that loss was 7 weeks and not 17 weeks, and definitely not 33 weeks like Olivia, it's equally a loss, right? And so it just that check reminded me how easy it is to slip back into those common comments, those common phraseology statements that we grew up hearing our relatives say in our circles, in our family parties and holidays gatherings, because no one knew better. They
Right.
didn't realize what they were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And we know because we went to, sharing parents, but I'm sure we would have discovered it in other ways, with social media, that those are the do not say, the do nots.
I think that our inclination or tendency when something tragic happens is to want to
Take away the pain
or
minimize
rationalize it or somehow make it feel better. But those comments actually don't help. And I'm actually going to be talking a little bit more about that in one of our next episodes. But it's important to know that, comments like that, we need to recheck before we speak, because especially if you're not experienced a miscarriage or a pregnancy loss, just to kind of check our minds and our thoughts before we say something like that, like an at least statement, because it most likely is not very helpful to the person that is experiencing the loss. So.
Yeah. If we take a beat and we allow for silence, that even though that doesn't fill the void, we get it. It's awkward. It will be easier and diminish the probability or the possibility of saying something inappropriate, because you're leaving or holding space is probably the best way to say it. Then you're holding space for the mom or the dad to just tell you how they feel.
Yeah.
Because it's not about you. Anything that you're trying to say makes it about you. And that's just human nature, and it's a natural, second nature responses, right? It's natural. But silence in this case, and in more cases, find out than not, it's better to be silent and wait for the person who's grieving, whether it's a loss of a child, a loss of a parent, loss of a job, loss. It's better to let the griever tell you what they need to talk about and what they need to be, what they need to say or to be said, than for you to say anything. If you're there to comfort, then be that ear or that heart with ears, right? Which means don't talk as much as possible.
Yeah.
Other than, comfort. I love you. I'm here for you. Man, I'm here to support you. I'm your buddy. You got anything you want to talk about, tell me, type thing.
Be a safe person is basically what I think a heart with ears is. If you are concerned about having a miscarriage or feel you are at high risk of having one, please be sure to speak with your OB or medical provider. The reason we wanted to open up and share in detail my physical symptoms of miscarriage is because we hope it helps others to feel less alone. That maybe you can identify with a little bit of what we experienced or all of it. The next few weeks, we will uncover more misconceptions and discuss topics on miscarriage. There's definitely more to come. We hope you found this episode helpful and hope you feel you are not alone. You are loved. We are here to support you in any way that we can.
If you got value out of this episode, please give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell to get alerts for when we release new content every week. If you like this episode and want to see another video podcast, click or tap on the video above. If you'd like to go a little bit deeper, we do have a grief series called The Pregnancy Journey, grieving from diagnosis to the loss of your baby and beyond. You can click or tap on the image below.